Hi everyone. For this section of the training, we're going to cover releases of information, otherwise known as ROIs, and service point. So before we talk about how to add a ROI into the system itself, we're going to go over what an ROI is. So a release of information reflects a form signed by the client. So it's an actual hard copy form. It's explained to the client. We do have a client fact sheet that can help you in explaining that to the client so that they understand what they're actually signing and what they're allowing us to do within the system. They sign the consent form so that their information is shared across all HMIS partners and agencies. That consent is viable only for 1 year at a time. So every year this consent has to be updated and renewed with new dates on it that allows information to be shared within those 2 dates ranges. It's also important that the client knows that the HMIS consent form only grants visibility within the system. So it only allows their information to be visible across the system with programs and agencies that are participating in the ROI itself. Each agency has their own visibility settings within the system that allows specific information to be shared. So some agencies may share case notes, some agencies may choose not to. That's really settings that's in each individual program and agency that are set up. The ROI is also not a factor in whether or not they receive services. So even if a client decides, no, I don't want to sign this release of information, I don't want my information shared across or visible to other programs and agencies in the system for whatever reason, it still does not mean that they're not going to get services. They will still receive services. They will still receive shelter or housing or case management, even if they decide that they don't want to sign the ROI. Clients can also access their HMIS records themselves. That's part of the ROI process that's written in the consent form so that clients know that at any time they can access and receive a copy of their HMIS record. And that is the ability to access it is in the form of the client audit request form that's located at the Housing and Homeless Coalition's website, which is hhccny.org. So you can access that form and send it to your system administrators. The client can send it themselves if they so choose and access their information, any information that's in HMIS themselves. So this is what the consent form looks like. So this is what the ROI form looks like that all clients sign. You can see that there's the client name, date of birth, agency, and program on it, the list of all participating agencies that are within the system, the release dates, their signature, and then there's also a section within the release form. So if a client decides to rescind the release at any date and time, that's located on here. So if a client signs this today, but in a month or 2 from now, they decide, I really don't want this information shared anymore, they can rescind the release as of the date that they're signing it. So next, we're going to go right into service point. We're going to talk about how to add an electronic version of the ROI form into service point to allow a client's information to be visible outside of the program. So you're going to go into the client file. So for Angela, we're going to go to the tab that says ROI, and we're going to click Add Release of Information. So if you remember in previous webinars, we have created Angela as a client. We have created a household for Angela. We've edited that household. So when adding a release of information for Angela, if she does have multiple individuals within her household, you can add one ROI into the system and it covers information for all of those individuals within the household. So when you click on this checkbox right here, it'll add and copy this release of information to Johnny and Amy's file automatically. so you don't have to add 3 releases in 3 different sections within the system. Also, you can see that there is a provider that pops up here. When you're entering information into the system, you have to double check this provider to say, does this look right? So Catholic Charities of Onondaga County is what we call an agency level provider. So guess what? I made a mistake. I need to go back. Catholic Charities is not the provider. So I'm going to cancel out of this, change my enter data as to the appropriate program within the system that I'm doing data entry for. Go back into Angela's file, go back to the ROI tab and add the release of information. So now when I check the family into the release of information, I can see that Catholic Charities Home at Last, which is a permanent housing program, comes up as the appropriate provider. Yes, that's correct. So then I can continue. Was the release granted, yes or no? Hopefully the client has decided to share their release or share their information across the system. This is extremely important for care coordination. So when a person is coming into the system, especially if they're entering through a street outreach provider or a emergency shelter, participating in coordinated entry and care coordination, when there's a release of information that was granted, it makes this process just a little bit easier. The start date of the release is the date that the client signed the initial start of the release. The end date, so it's usually a year from the date that it was signed. So if you go put in an end date, it always has to be a year from the date that it was signed. And then was there documentation? So what's the documentation? Is it a signed statement from the client? Then you would add that into there. Hopefully it's a signed physical ROI form. Was there a witness? And if so, who that witness was? The witness is always the staff person who signed the actual physical release. So this information has to match the physical release, the piece of paper that was signed. So once we sign or fill in that information and we save it, the release is then added with specific date ranges. There's also an attachment section to the ROI. You can actually select this attachment section, this little paper clip or binder clip. You can upload a signed copy of the ROI if you so choose. It's not a requirement within the system, but it's something that you can do so that you always have a copy of the actual signed physical release of information in the system itself. You can add a new file attachment for choose a file, upload it, and then save it. And that's how to add an ROI to Service Point. Thank you.